CHGO White Sox Podcast, coming to you live from Studio A of our CHGO offices here in the West Loop of Chicago. It's the full CHGO White Sox crew with you on this off day. Good news for you White Sox fans, they can't lose today. There's no game, 17 straight losses, but today will be a day of peace, right? They'll lay their weapons down and leave the White Sox alone. That's Vinnie Duber, our CHGO White Sox beat writer. That is Herb Lawrence.
Oh.
You can follow him at EctorWall23. He's our CHGO White Sox community leader. I'm Sean Anderson. We're being produced today by Sarah.
Hello.
Hello. And we got a very important topic today. We basically talked about it mostly on our post-game show yesterday, but Pedro Grifol's future with the Chicago White Sox. I think for the large part of this season, we've assumed that he would be able to finish out this year, especially with Joe Cowley's report that was in a Billy Donovan piece where Jerry Reinsdorf thought he was fireable last year, but it was about finishing out the year, finishing out that contract and not paying another manager. Here we are, though, first day of August. It feels like the winds are shifting a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, the last couple days have been interesting on that front, and I think it basically has everything to do with Chris Getz and what the general manager said after the trade deadline. I mean, this was deep into his media session talking about the trades that
last thing he said, I think.
One of them, yeah, that the White Sox did make on Monday and Tuesday, and he was asked kind of, as mostly like a clarification, hey, is it safe to assume that Pedro is going to be here the rest of the year? And rather than just say yes or anything like that, a vote of confidence or a compliment toward his manager in any regard, he decided to not talk about it at all and say, we're going to decompress from the trade deadline and figure out what happens after that. And that could be interpreted as many different things, but what it definitely wasn't was saying definitively that Pedro will be sticking around. And so, listen, this is going to be the worst season in the history of the White Sox. This might be the worst season in the modern history of Major League Baseball by any individual team. And so I think a managerial change would not be surprising, right? This is the kind of thing that happens in Major League Baseball when things go horribly not according to plan. But like you said, Sean, we've been kind of just assuming, hey, This team wasn't expected to do much this year. At least this was going to go to the end of the year, because every reason you could give right now for moving on from Pedro Grifol, if you're the White Sox, probably applied for the last, let's be honest, since the first week of the season, right? And so to do it now would be weird, but what Chris Getz said the other day was also weird. And so I think that there's a brand new spotlight or a intensified spotlight on this topic because suddenly we have reason to think that what we assumed might no longer be the case.
I mean, the old saying, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. These are humans, and while Pedro has deserved to be released from his job because of the performance of the team that he manages, I feel sorry for the person because he's just left in limbo. Is he getting fired today? Is he getting fired next week? Is he getting fired after the last game of the year? So I think he knows his fate. He's going to get fired this year, and he deserves it. But it's also, at the end of the day, he's a human being, and he and his family have to make plans for the future about what they're going to be doing. So I feel sorry for the person, but yeah, he has deserved to be removed from his job for a long time. But as Vinny says, is it going to improve the team? No, probably not. But is there something that Chris Getz and the other people on the White Sox staff feel that they can gain? Is there a positivity to firing Pedro that's behind there? And if he believes that there's positivity behind there, I think he'll pull the trigger. But today seems like a weird time to do it as they're traveling.
And let's talk about that part right now. August 1st, will this be the day that Pedro Grifol is fired? We sit here at 1 p.m. I know Ian was asking in our diehard Discord if it was possible for another emergency podcast. As people who today's day is Friday, I really hope that they either fire him at 1:15 today, or maybe they just let him finish out the Minnesota series. But my gut feeling, if there was enough murmuring yesterday, and you even felt like Jesse Rogers was doing a little bit more reporting rather than speculating. Merck had a similar quote in his piece today on MLB.com. It feels like it would have happened already. They would have had a morning meeting to set up the team for Charlie Montoyo's taking over of the White Sox. It feels like the closer and closer that we get to 5 p.m., that just pushes the deadline to actually make that move for Pedro Grifol because they have to travel. They have to get on the road, go to a place on Friday. I don't think,
and then go to Oakland after that.
And
by
then
the
go to
way,
Oakland.
on the other side of the country.
Doesn't sound fun. It feels like you have to have the idea to fire him, and I think you talked about why put off something you could do today or yesterday when you could do it today. I don't know what the hell you said. You said something about putting it off. Feels like they could have done this yesterday to let him know and let the team know and prep, or at least done it this morning. I think since we've passed noon, it doesn't feel like it's happening today, even though it could happen at any moment, according to Ken Rosenthal. So fun for Pedro Grifol, like you said.
Yeah, I think, you would already, just as I talked about him being a human, that would be a shitty thing to do, to fire both either right now, like from 1 p.m. on, when they're about to travel to Minnesota, it's a short flight, and or on the road in Minnesota or Oakland. That would be a really shitty thing to do. Yeah, he deserved it, but there's no reason to wait for, there's nothing you're going to find out in Minneapolis that is different from what happened this week. What, it loses 24 in a row or 23 in a row instead of 17 in a row? I mean, what's the difference? So I hope that they...
One's a major league record.
At least, I mean...
There is a difference.
I mean, there's a difference, but it's not really anything different as far as Chris Getz, the White Sox, concerned. Yeah, if you put... I mean, I would actually like it more. I mean, they're setting records anyways. They've already set their season futility record twice this year, and they keep on going. So I don't think there's anything in there that you can actually stake and say you should deserve to get fired after this Oakland series because you didn't beat one of the worst teams in the American League. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. And if they do it after the Cubs series, that doesn't even jibe either, because who cares? The Cubs suck too. It doesn't, like, if you're going to fire him, fire him. Don't wait.
I think, Herb, I mean, listen, there's two things at work here, but I think, at least in my opinion, and when it comes to the discussion of this, why are we talking about the results on the field at this point, right? I mean,
that's a good point.
The expectations were what they were before the season started, and while this team has been much worse than anybody could have imagined, certainly from a win-loss perspective, they weren't supposed to compete for anything. And now, if you were to fire Pedro Grifol and make a managerial change with 2 months to go in a season in which there's nothing to compete for, what does it do for you? Because it doesn't matter if all of a sudden they played great over the last 2 months because Pedro Grifol's not there. Okay, and it's not like you're chasing a playoff spot or anything like that. I understand it's better to win than it is to lose, right? But the idea should be what benefits this White Sox team for the long term. And if you can point to a benefit over the next 2 months, go for it. But I'm not seeing one that is wildly beneficial to what this team could do even next year. And remember, next year, they're not expected to be very good either.
And I'll just play devil's advocate on this, where AJ Pierzynski, after all the rumors that circulated that he's been in talks about being the White Sox new manager, he came out and said, you know what, they already have a manager, so I'm not going to be talking about that, and I haven't met with the White Sox. That might be a benefit where you get a jump on the replacement of Pedro Grifol, and people who would be hesitant to talk about the open job for the job of Pedro Grifol's because it's still not open. Then when he gets fired, you're like, okay, then it's a little bit more feasible. You could talk to people who are retired.
You can only talk to people who are currently unemployed, though.
Yes, but
also no one's hiring AJ besides the White Sox.
Exactly, but it's the White Sox, so that is not a.
They don't need to get a leg up on the competition.
No, I'm just saying, like, you can have people who would otherwise be hesitant to talk to the White Sox about that job because now Pedro's out of that job, and now somebody like Tito Francona, I know that's a pipe dream, but still, he's free, he's available, and he probably wouldn't be talking about this job if Pedro's still at the helm of that job.
I don't understand that. Why not? I mean, if
because
Tony La Russa tries to have a conversation with a retired Tony Francona, if he's willing to return to a managerial position in 2025, like, that's disrespectful. Just asking Terry a question.
Yeah, it's disrespectful. As a manager, I think he would have respect for a person that has their job, and he doesn't want to talk about a job that another person has until that person doesn't have that job anymore.
Respectfully to Pedro Grifol, I guess. I mean, you really want to protect the person, and I understand. But, like, the writing is on the wall in Sharpie. It is the thick Sharpie too. Like it is the wide Sharpie. It is Pedro Grifol's win-loss record of 322. There is two baseball managers, Doc Prothro and John McCloskey, who have a worse win-loss record. Like
the Doc Prothro.
Like, of course he's getting fired. Like, it's a business. Skip Schumacher got fired before the season was over. He's probably wondering where he's going to go in 2025. He's got a relationship with Tony La Russa. We know that Garrett Crochet shouldn't have been talking with other teams about an extension, but he was. You don't think that Skip Schumacher's talking with Tony La Russa about coming to the Chicago in 2025? Like, these backdoor conversations are absolutely happening because it's a business. I don't think it matters if Pedro Grifol is warming that seat or if it's Charlie Montoyo warming that seat.
I do think they do. I think those managers have respect for the job that person has and doesn't want to step on any toes, doesn't want any speculation that they're coming back to take Pedro's job.
But the GM didn't give him that respect. The GM let the speculation run wild. I mean, half the reason we're having this conversation is because Chris Getz said, "Hey, what are you doing about the manager?" He said, "I don't know."
I think
that's leaving it open to speculation.
Herb, I think to your point, that would be a really poorly run managerial search if you're doing it in August. There are, you would imagine, a lot of candidates to be the next manager of whatever team that are currently trying to win the World Series with their present team in whatever role that might be, whether they're currently a manager, whether they're currently a bench coach, whether they're currently a field coordinator or whatever, right? I think the reason that you see these managerial searches take place when you do is because you want to make sure you can cast the widest net possible and talk to the people that are having success and the people that you would want to bring in to instill those kind of values into your organization. Now, the only two names that have been brought up are people that, again, have close ties to the people at the top of the White Sox organization. We're only talking about Skip Schumacher because he played for Tony La Russa in St. Louis. We're only talking about A.J. Pierzynski because he helped win the 2005 World Series for Jerry Reinsdorf, right? I mean, the whole thing that Rick Hahn talked about before he got fired and Chris Getz has mentioned since he has taken over the job is the benefit of outside ideas and the, look at the people that Chris brought in to surround him in the front office. Look at the guy that eventually Rick Hahn hired as manager in Pedro Grifol. It didn't work out, but the idea was to get away from just hiring former White Sox and former White Sox people again because Tony La Russa flew in the face of that so much. So when you hear people say, "Oh, bring back Ozzie," or you hear somebody say, "Oh, AJ should be the manager," that is just an incredible lack of creativity. And it doesn't mean it might not happen, but one of the things that has worked against the White Sox for some time now is just hiring people who are White Sox people. And so I would think that if you were serious about turning an organization around, as Chris Getz claims to be, you would be on the hunt for somebody who wasn't just your boss's friend.
But also, every single manager besides Pedro had White Sox ties under the Jerry Reinsdorf era.
Correct.
Every one of them.
Correct.
Every single one of them. And so that's what Jerry, I'm thinking, is going to look at Chris Getz and like, hey, the guy we hired from outside the organization led us to the 101 loss season and then the worst record we've ever had and the worst record in Major League Baseball history, maybe. So, Chris, I don't want to go outside the organization because when we're with the organization, at least we're 500. At least we're around 500. Now, when we went outside of White Sox knowledge, this guy is the example of what happens when you go outside the organization.
The Tony makes sense. Obviously, Robin and Ozzie, you don't need to explain. What was Rick Renteria's connection?
He was the bench coach.
He was Robin's bench coach.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean,
just that 1 year.
Jerry Manuel?
He was a minor league coach or scout for the White Sox years before he became a manager or a coach of the Mets or whatever it was.
And then same with Terry, Gene, and Jeff, just guys that were promoted.
Yeah, Terry was a third base coach. Gene Lamont was Jim Leland's third base coach. Jim Fergosi
was a pitcher.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you're here. Get here.
Hey, all right. And hey, same team that made Hawk the general manager. All right, we got to take a break. Herb's got to let us know about our friends over at Prize Picks. We'll also let you know about our friends over at Sunnyside. We'll keep up this Pedro Grifol discussion as well. But Herb, let us know about Prize Picks.
Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot of winning up to 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game by watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make Prize Picks lineups in as little as 60 seconds. All you need to do is pick more or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. And with the all-stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese having some well-deserved time off right now, focus turns to Paris in the summer games, as greats like Brianna Stewart, Asia Wilson, and Kelsey Plum will be players that I'll be focused on, and you can win up 100 times your cash by watching them ball out in Paris. And if you're looking for promotions, PrizePick has you covered every single week. Download the app today and use the code CHGO for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code CHGO for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
We want to let you know about our friends over at Sunnyside. Our friends at Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary are here to elevate your summer. They're here to be your home for judgment-free cannabis shopping. They have a crazy selection that you can check out online with over 100 different strains to choose from, with easy online ordering and in-store pickup wherever you are in Illinois. Whether you are as south as Champaign, as far north as South Beloit, they are all across this great state. Stop into the store nearest you for expert guidance from their staff, or select from quality lines like Cresco or Floracal. And here for the summer is Good News is Tea Time Disposable Vape. It's bringing a classic lemonade flavor that's perfect for the golf course. I saw some Lala goers as well. Back for a limited time is Good News is Free Spirit vapes and cartridges. There's a mango flavor that they're very excited about that you can go try out. So go to sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. That's 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter promo code HICHGO to check out at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary. Bright buys every day, only for 21 plus or Illinois medical card holders. Sarah, if you could scroll up just a little bit. I do think, to your point about being creative with White Sox managers, I do think Ozzie, it's tired, right? AJ may be a little bit more wired, but the true, I think, creative, peak there, Jim Thome. I think it actually makes sense. I know Thome hasn't actually been a manager, but he's been with the Sox as a manager, as a part-time roving instructor, and at least with them for spring training. I know he's got a son that's currently in high school that I think he's currently coaching. So I don't know.
He's part of the front office
right now.
He's a special assistant in the front office. You see him around the ballpark quite frequently.
He seems more of like the manager type than AJ. I don't know. I would rather have Jim Thome than AJ Pierzynski. It's still recycling former White Sox, but hey, I like that White Sox.
There's also 29 other organizations that have people that do this job as well.
And then Brian saying any manager with a track record and respect from the league would be interviewing the Sox more than they would be for him. Why should I want this job? I think at least, though, to the names that we've heard, AJ talked about exactly what Pedro said. There's only 30 of these jobs. It would be an honor to be a major league manager. So that's part of it. Again, it could be a bad managerial job, but it's a managerial job. And then with Skip Schumacher, he is somebody who you would think has trust in Tony La Russa. And if Tony is one of these upper echelon people of the front office, I don't know if we actually know his current position, but it seems
advisor.
Like, okay, yeah. It seems like he's advising a lot. It seems like if you do have that trust with that advisor, that would be why you would want to go there, is because you could trust the person above you.
I mean, I think to your point on that comment, which is, of course, someone would want to manage in the big leagues. That's absolutely true. And it comes with a nice paycheck usually as well. But there is something to that point, which is anybody that's taking this job is, at least to our eyes, looking like they're going to be managing a team that is way off from contending, right? Yes. And listen, the gears of the rebuild can move in ways that we don't expect or ways that we can't see from right here, and it could be a very different story, let's say 2 years from now, right? But as of right now, it seems like this is going to take a very long time. And so if you're accepting that managerial job and you've seen what has happened with White Sox managers in the last 5 years, do you think you're going to be the White Sox manager by the time that they're contending again? Pedro Grifol is the 4th White Sox manager in the last 5 years, in the last 5 seasons. If they fire him before the end of this season and Montoyo takes over, that'll be 5-5. And then assuming they hire someone who wouldn't be Montoyo next year, that would be 6-6. 6 managers in 6 seasons.
Pretty impressive.
That's if that's what ends up happening, and it hasn't yet, so I guess we can pump the brakes a little. But if they have 6 managers in 6 years, that says as much about the state of this team as anything, right?
And somebody asked, like, what would a good manager, a person that's worth their salt, be doing here for the White Sox? These guys, remember, have huge egos. They can be like, hey, yeah, I see that problem, but I'm the right person to fix that. And also, to Vinny's point, yeah, it's 5 years away, but I'm sure if anybody has a bright future and the White Sox are one of the teams out there looking for them to be the manager, they can ask for more money, or they can ask for more years than usual conventional styles. Like, hey, this is going to take longer than the typical 3-year contract. I'm not going to be here only for 3 years, and this is not going to be, the job's not going to be done by 3 years. So you got to give me a little bit more length and a little bit more rope to do it. And usually Jerry is very loyal, but lately the team, as Vinny just pointed out, has sucked. So they've been changing managers like it's going out of style. So I would
one
think
of
that
those obviously was health related reasons with Tony.
He's still around,
and he's still there. But like, and typically if you're looking around, like Jerry usually keeps his managers around for a decent amount of time. If they want to stay, they can stay.
Well, that's
like Robin left
with everybody.
Yeah,
I mean,
Ozzie left.
Well, and I mean, even with Pedro, he's going to be forced out. But I mean, the guy that hired him and the guy that, you know, had the opportunity to likely replace him chose to stick with him because at the time, I believe Chris Getz believed in Rick Hahn's decision to hire Pedro Grifol because there was a lot of groupthink in that front office. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't understand Getz's and Hahn's relationship, but it seems like Chris Getz was fully supportive of keeping Pedro Grifol because I think that there was a lot of groupthink in that White Sox, and you kept that groupthink alive by just promoting Chris Getz and not getting rid of like the entire crop that was in that front office.
Well, rather than speculate, we can actually just, I mean, Chris Getz got that question last year when he was introduced, and he cited continuity as the reason behind wanting to stick with Pedro Grifol when at the time, this was last August, to that point that I just made. The fact that there were still guys that either could have or were going to be a part of the team moving forward. The guy who was just traded, like Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert Jr., plenty of others. Yoan Moncada is still on this team, whether he has played for them in a while or not. He is still on the team. I think the idea was to try to get the most out of guys like that, guys who had been around. Let's not give them yet another manager, especially right in the middle of the season like was last year. So I think we can cite that stated reason as being why he chose to keep Pedro Grifol last summer. As of for why he might make a change in the middle of this summer, that is something we don't know. And
at least to defend Getz on the continuity part, they have continued to be bad. So he's
worse.
I do want to let you know about Sunnyside as well. They are the presenting sponsor. I forgot to do that off the top. Coming to you live on the Sunnyside Summer Thursday. This is the CHGO White Sox Podcast. Visit sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary. Bright buys every day, only for 21 plus or Illinois medical card holders. And then to Brian, too, saying, how many openings will there be, though? Like the top options, if possible, Shoemaker will go elsewhere, and that's his concern because of the state of the Chicago White Sox. I think that's definitely a possibility. If we go back to when Grifol was hired, Espada was a name that I really liked from Houston, and it seems like they were interested in him. And from what I remember and recall, I could be wrong, it seemed like Joe Espada had interest but had some demands to become the White Sox manager, and those weren't met. So maybe, Skip Schumacher or somebody else doesn't like the current state of the Chicago White Sox, and they might need certain demands met, and those demands might not be met, and the White Sox might continue to stay in this state.
I would just hope that what Rick and Kenny failed at doing as far as letting Jerry know that the game has changed and we need to move towards more research and development. If you want to put analytics in there, we need to move more towards that. And I hope that Chris Getz is better at convincing Jerry that this is the way we need to go and we need to bulk up this part of our organization. And that would attract a younger, fresher, open-minded manager to lead them into the future, because we've already talked about the insular hires. But if Chris Getz is that guy who is young and had the smart mind and like he's Branch Rickey incarnate, please let Jerry know that the game that he is thinking about, the 2005 type of game, that's been passed. And what the White Sox need is help off the field with research and not throwing to people with bases open all the goddamn time. People who beat you all the time, let's let them not beat you and go for somebody else instead of the old type of thinking. So if he can get more people in the building that would actually have some good information for the manager so they can prepare for the game a little bit better, which I thought Pedro was going to have. These games haven't worked out as such, and I don't think that Pedro is, by his in-game managing, prepared for these games as he should be. And you could see the results. They're not as good. So if Chris Getz is going to be that guy, is going to be hiring the next guy, please let Jerry know that having more research and development and having people in your office is the best thing, instead of the low amount of people that reportedly they have in the research and development staff.
Hopefully Brian Bannister is getting a nice change and focusing on change, pushing forward that White Sox organization, hopefully.
Find a Brian Bannister on the offensive side.
I don't know if those exist. I would love to see it. But to go on to the Pedro stuff, Ken Rosenthal wrote today with The Athletic, by now the answer seems obvious that Pedro Grifol will be fired. The White Sox could elevate bench coach and former Blue Jays manager Charlie Montoyo to replace Grifol, or they could promote AAA manager Justin Jerschley, who is only 34, but in his 8th season managing Chicago system, Jerschley is familiar with many of the young players in the organization, and the idea of Pedro or removing Pedro to give those young players the right place to grow and develop. Maybe right now with the current situation with the clubhouse, maybe it's not the best place for those young players to go into. Do we buy into that at all? That's one angle that we haven't really brought up. We're going to be talking about prospects in just a second. I mean, can Pedro Grifol in the last 2 months create a place that is fruitful for prospects?
I mean, the way I see it, the staff, the field staff and the front office staff are so in concert with what they've been doing that I don't see how it would really change, right? I think that with the exception of the fact that they lose all the time, I think Chris Getz probably has something close to the environment that he wants to have when it comes to what the coaching staff is doing and what the clubhouse is like. I mean, the clubhouse has been great this year. I mean, that's all we hear from players all the time is how much better it is than last year, how much different things are, how all the losing has only affected them so much that it still hasn't broken them, right? And so I think if you're talking about the idea of promoting prospects into an environment where everybody's mad because they've been losing all year long, like, I don't really think that that's that much of a concern because the clubhouse seems to be strong. Now, you can certainly decide if you're Chris Getz that Pedro Grifol is not the guy that you want delivering the message to these young guys, that they would be better off hearing it from someone else. Maybe that's a thought. That's really the only thing that I can think of in terms of why you would make this move now as opposed to after the season is over. But that message seems to be Chris Getz's message, right? And so, I mean, all we've heard since Chris took over last summer is how on the same page he and Pedro are, and how excuse me, choking on stuff.
I can just jump in real quick.
Go ahead. Yeah, the answer.
Just as you're take a sip of water.
Sorry, I was just going to wrap that up by saying that Pedro has been such a proponent of what Chris is trying to do that I don't think Pedro's doing anything that Chris would disapprove of, other than the fact that they just lose all the time. And so if you're talking about bringing prospects up into an environment that is teaching the message that Chris Getz wants taught, why would you need to make a change?
And before, too, you go on and add on to that, Herb. Jesse Rogers is on foul territory, talking with Eric Kratz and the gang, says he doesn't expect White Sox manager Pedro Grifol to make it to Monday. Quote, there have been a lot of signs that they're going to make a change. Let's take a break, and then we will talk about that and continue this discussion on when Pedro Grifol would get canned, and if it could be as soon as today, if we're going to be doing an emergency podcast. Vinny.
Yes.
Why don't you let us know about Liney?
Guys, Leinenkugels is so good. And as you all know, it is summertime in Chicago, and the perfect drink to accompany all of your summertime activities is Leinenkugels Summer Shandy. It's a delicious mashup between lemonade and beer, and it just tastes wonderful every time you drink it. And it especially tastes wonderful when it's hot outside, the sun is shining, and you're doing things like sitting on the beach over by the lake. Maybe you're having a picnic. Maybe you're going down to the baseball stadium and having yourself a tailgate. Nothing accompanies that kind of activity better than summer shandy. But there's variety in case you want something a little different. Herb's having the Lakeside Cherry right now. They've got the Honey Vice. They've got the Berry Vice. They've got the Sunset Wheat rolls around every once in a while. They've got Liney's Original. They've got so many beers that you can choose from, and they're all very tasty. The folks up there in Wisconsin, they know what they're doing. Guys, flavor life's simple moments with Leinenkugels, the official craft beer of the Chicago White Sox. Go to Liney.com/CHGO to find delivery options near you. That's LEINIE.com/CHGO, or pick up Leinenkugels pretty much anywhere they sell beer. Leinenkugels, flavor the moment. Celebrate responsibly. The Jacob Leinenkugel Brewing Company, Chippewa Falls.
Yes. On CHGO, we have podcasts and live shows on every team every day. Post-game shows, premium written content for members at ALLCITY.com from people like Vinnie Duber, Jared Willis also doing Cubs stuff and White Sox stuff for us. But why don't you become a diehard member? Because diehards get a free t-shirt when they do join up, 20% off of merch in the future, and also, I think most importantly, 20% off to one of our fun events. And like this fun event we got coming up, it's called the CHGO White Sox Takeover. It is next Friday, where it's Hawaiian Shirt Day, and we're at the Cubs White Sox game at Guaranteed Rate Field. After the game, post-game fireworks. That game, the White Sox can set the modern-day record for losses in a row. So why don't
continue to lose?
Why don't you be there and celebrate the White Sox futility? You get 20% off of that if you become a diehard. Also, we have CHGO Bears takeovers or the tailgates coming up not every, but most Bears home games this year. They're the funnest things that I've been to on CHGO's event thing. Even the golf event that we got coming up on August 23rd, which is very fun at Cog Hill, 20% off of that. So why don't you become an all CHGO diehard today? Because you get access to our Discord too. You can talk to the great folks who are in our Discord right now, like Jared CWS and our guy Alejandro, etc., etc. So allchgo.com/join-diehards/ So become a diehard member today, and you get dope merch for all teams, free shirt when you become a member, and of course, members only Discord access.
Thank you, Herb. And make sure you do check that out if you do have any questions over the weekend. And if Pedro Grifol is fired, we'll obviously be reacting in that Discord. We do have some new diehards, too, that we are very thankful for. There's obviously been some great coverage by our Bears team over at training camp, and they've been a part of joining the team because of that. But our new diehards, we want to thank Ibrahim, Ivan, and Connor for joining and becoming diehards today. All right, so some things in the chat that I do want to address too, and then I try to weave this back into what Jesse said and the maybe loomingness of Pedro Grifol's removal as manager. Sarah, if you want to scroll up just a little bit. Some people talking about blaming Pedro, even if it is Pedro's fault. The roster's bad, but Pedro praised roster moves and construction before the season. And then Michael saying Pedro is merely one element of White Sox incompetence. You cannot look at a team that is currently 27 and I don't even know. I can't even
think
84.
84, yeah.
84. You can't look at a team at 27 and 84 and pin it on one thing. It's Pedro Grifol. It's Jerry Reinsdorf. It's Chris Getz. It is every single hitter on this team. It's injuries. It is youthfulness. I mean, it is every single reason. You do not get to a 24% win-loss record without being bad at every single thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not just on Pedro.
Exactly.
Pedro could manage the 1927 Yankees. Maybe they wouldn't win as much games as they did, but like they'd probably have they may have like 2 losses less.
Yeah,
2 wins less.
All right.
I mean,
there's a lineup.
Go ahead. He's not going to tell Babe Ruth to bunt, and Babe Ruth isn't bunting with a 50-ounce bat. So I mean, like I think this isn't all on Pedro, but like there is a point when it does reach a boiling point. But again, like my point as a Sox fan, that was last year. I didn't need to see Pedro Grifol after July. I think we got a large idea of what he was as a manager. He seemed a little bit shy, coy. He really hasn't gone out and made definitive statements. Maybe some people would bring up the Oscar Colas stuff from last year. Obviously, the game after the Orioles where he said they were fucking flat. That was one of his more outgoing moments. But he's been typically a lower profile manager.
But that's just his personality. I don't think that's something that points to his job effectiveness. I think that point is a good one that Brian brought up, which is he's failed to do what he said he was going to do.
Well, right.
Yeah,
But like a lot of people said he's a
was
nice guy, but like he's just not the right guy for the job. And I think that's just been more clear the more we've seen him.
I mean, here's the thing. All this time removed from when he was hired and the fact that they're now on pace for the most losses ever, you forget that he was hired to help them become a contender. He was hired to take a 500 team and make all those guys better. Oh boy, Eloy Jimenez, you're going to see him do what you've long waited for him to do. Luis Robert Jr., Yohan Moncada, Tim Anderson, all these guys, most of whom are gone now at this point. Him and his staff were hired to bring them to come in and take guys who had yet to live up to their potential and make them live up to their potential. They failed to do that. Plain and simple, and Pedro would tell you, because he knows what reality is, that they have not done that. At the beginning of this year, the expectations changed wildly. His job assignment changed wildly. He was no longer expected to manage a team to a division title or to the playoffs or to the World Series. He was expected to improve them fundamentally, to take a team that made so many mistakes and stop making mistakes. Mm-hmm. He and his staff have failed to do that. They make mistakes all the time. They blow saves all the time. They have so many losses. They might have the most losses in a single season ever from a team that has played since the turn of the last century. So everything, if you're saying, has Pedro done enough to be fired? Yeah, of course he has, because his job is to not have them be this bad, and he hasn't been able to do that. But absolutely, he is not the worst thing about this team. He is not this team's biggest problem. But two things can be true at the same time. And in Major League Baseball, when you don't do the job that you're assigned to do, a lot of the time, you lose that job, especially when you're in the manager's position or the general manager's position, as we saw happen with the White Sox last summer. So there's a lot that needs to be done to turn this organization around. That's Chris Getz's job, and he will have a much longer runway to do that than just a couple of years. But both ahead of last year when the team was supposed to win and ahead of this year when the team was just supposed to play better, Pedro Grifol has not managed to do either of those things.
When people ask the question of, like, he has a bad roster, how is this his fault? Vinnie just laid it out very beautifully exactly what Pedro has done or hasn't done as a manager. But I like to ask people who ask those questions, what has he done to retain his job? What has he done that enhances the White Sox? What has he done to be a guy that should still be the manager? Like, where's his positives? What would you say, who was asking that question? Where does he bring the White Sox from one point to a higher point?
He's got a nice smile.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what Pedro does demeanor-wise. I mean, I guess you could say the clubhouse was shit last year. The clubhouse is not shit this year.
Correct.
So, but that's his positive.
And no White Sox fan wants to hear that because the record is what it is, but that is true.
Did the clubhouse change a lot, though, after the trade deadline?
You mean in the last 2 days or last year?
Like, would you say like August and September of last year was more similar to this year, or was it still kind of iffy of last year?
It was still kind of iffy because it was already broken, right? There was no chance to start fresh, I don't think. Their record was so bad, and the feelings. I mean, because Rick Hahn came out and said last year when they made those trades at the deadline, they did it to improve the problems that were in the clubhouse, right? And so even if all the people who were causing those problems, let's say, were gone, and I don't know the specifics of what, but then it doesn't mean like they're gone and everything's suddenly sunshine again kind of thing. So I think that a lot of the positivity in this year's clubhouse are from the moves that Chris Getz made in the offseason, right? Guys like Nicky Lopez and Paul DeJong, and even up into the season, man, those people loved being Tommy Pham's teammate, I'll tell you that much. But again, they didn't win any games, and so fans aren't going to be like, oh, thank God Nicky Lopez and Tommy Pham were here. That makes the season all the more enjoyable. It might for those guys in the clubhouse, though, and that's good. And I think Pedro admitted to maybe taking an incorrect approach in his first year, that he claimed he was going to switch that up this year. And if that's the case, it has been to positive effect on that front. But I don't think anybody cares about that in the fan base. And again, when it comes to making these types of pro Major League Baseball type moves, I don't think you get judged based on the win-loss record of clubhouse interactions. You get based on the win-loss record of the games you play on the field.
There's players that did come and have left subsequently. Man, there's nobody happier than Tommy Pham. Going back down to St. Louis, grand slam his first game, 3 for 3 the next day. You see last night,
getting a standing ovation.
Michael Kopech blowing away Padres. Man,
I saw the highlights of all of those final strikes, and
though.
none of I know, but I'm just saying, like, you see Michael Kopech pitch in a Dodgers uniform, and it looks like Michael Kopech pitching. Like it is exactly what we saw in Chicago. They were just swinging. I mean, one of those balls was at a guy's forehead.
It's because did you see the rise?
I saw the rise every time he pitched with the White Sox.
I know, but
most guys just didn't swing at that.
I'm telling you, Luis Campusano hit a home run and had a double off Clayton Kershaw, who's washed, by the way. And the swings, and same thing with the Ha-Seong Kim. Like, he went away like those Yankee batters that one time where Michael Kopech was on, and like, this sumbitch is it. And his pitch mix was different. 17 pitches, 11 four-seam fastballs, and they called it a cutter, but it's more of a power slider.
Yeah. I mean, he was the same thing he was throwing in Chicago. I mean, there's
filthy.
nothing really that different. And I mean, he talked about, why he had success with the immaculate inning was because he started throwing that pitch. He knew how to make the changes. And I just would like to see 4 more outings before we say that he's back. Again, there's a lot of balls that were swung at.
He's back.
In that thing.
Mark Pryor fixed him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. One thing too that I just want to address, and then we'll get into some of these prospects that are coming up. If you can scroll up just a little bit, Ellie brought this up, and then I think Ian was bringing up, talking about what James Fox said. The White Sox sent money to Baltimore with Aloy, but I don't think that has to do anything with Pedro. They don't have to have the buyout for Aloy, but at the end of the day, I think Pedro is due about maybe $2 million. I think because his contract goes up. He signed for 5.5, so whatever 5.5 divided by 3 is, I think it's 1.8. So I think it was like 1.25, 1.5, and then increasing whatever. Do the math to make it 5.5. But they can buy him out. They did not need that trade to buy out Pedro Grifol. If they want to get rid of Pedro Grifol, they will get rid of Pedro Grifol. It was not a money thing. And 2, they have the money right now. They could fire him right now. If they let him manage out this series and then fire him on Sunday, it's not because the money cleared or the check cleared. It's just that's when they decide to fire him. It is just truly when they decide to pull the trigger, it is all loaded and ready to go. It's just, I was going to make
another joke
comparison to a dog.
Old Yeller out there? Goodness gracious.
Sorry. Oh my God.
Perfect drop.
I said it earlier.
I tried to keep myself from saying it.
It would be very, I think, disrespectful to fire Pedro this weekend on the road. I was telling Courtney this, and she didn't know. It's a total different regime way back in the day where the White Sox let Carlton Fisk and released him in Cleveland back in the day. And I was like, that was the coldest shit I ever had. And they got that man's number and his statue at Guaranteed Rate Field. But if they were going to do it, I would hope they would have the heart to do it where the man doesn't have to travel and then get fired. Just fire him at the crib so he can get his stuff together, go about his business, find another job on the market. I hope that Jesse Rogers' report on foul territory is not true, that they don't fire him before the weekend ends, before Monday. That would be very, very bad if they do that, in my opinion.
We also speculated that maybe next Thursday, which is also an off day, would make sense. My guy Alex Rude throwing out, that's a pretty big couple of series coming up. You have the Cubs and Yankees. Is there any bump to attendance if Pedro Grifol's fired on the 8th?
That game's going to be sold out anyways, and you can get your tickets on the takeover too.
Yes, you can. Way to get the plug in. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
You're gonna fire your manager to goose ticket sales. That's the conspiracy theory.
Oh my God, Pedro's not there anymore. I can come to this game when this team's won 27 games.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like he's probably going to make it for some reason to the end of the season. I hear that Getz's comment was weird, but I think he was probably like, all right, I got through 17 minutes of this. I didn't cry about Garrett Crochet. And then, I think it was Merck threw out the question, hey, what do you do with Pedro?
It was Jesse.
Forgot about this. But Jesse throws it out there. It's like, forgot about this.
Yeah.
He wasn't prepped. It was definitely a weird answer, but I think,
I didn't say it was definitive. I just said it was weird because it was weird.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely. I mean, you read the quote. I mean, you have the piece up at allchgo.com. Feel free to read it. If I was Pedro Grifol and my boss said, "We just wrapped the trade deadline. We just want to focus on that. We'll get through tonight and kind of debrief and look at the players we acquired and move on from there." That is not saying Pedro's done a great job. We're excited for him to finish out the season.
Or even our evaluations are constantly ongoing or something like that, right?
That's just avoiding the question completely. So that is absolutely should deserve both raised eyebrows. But then I guess you're just kind of like, is that anything?
Surprise.
Maybe a surprise, I guess. Yeah, a little bit surprised. But I think it's likely Pedro Grifol finishes 2024 as the White Sox manager. You guys?
I would think so. If you don't fire him today before they've traveled, I don't see the reason to fire him after.
Do you fire him after the losing streak's over? Like, if you think like, oh, we're firing him now, we'll just wait until the losing streak's over. Like, does that matter? Like,
I don't.
You don't want to let Charlie Montoyo pick it up halfway through.
I don't understand why the losing streak is the big factor here.
I don't know.
They had
It's embarrassing.
They had a 14-game losing streak earlier in the season. That was a franchise record.
It's not 17 though.
It was.
No, I agree with you. Again, if what Joe Colley reported was true, and I believe that it was true, that Jerry Reinsdorf thought he could, Pedro Grifol had a fire-worthy season last year. I mean, like, what about this year makes it any better? I mean, what redeeming qualities have you seen to be like, oh, this guy doesn't deserve to be fired?
But why? Like, what's important about the next 2 months? Thank God we got rid of him and we can play August and September, and things are going to be so much better.
You have to finish out the season.
That roster still is the same.
There are games scheduled. You will have to finish them out.
I know this is, past prologue. So has Jerry ever fired a manager in season or his people who are general managers? I don't believe so. I think all the managers, even bad ones like Terry Bevington, finished their seasons, and Ozzie left. That wasn't a firing. He left like 3 games.
2 games. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
And Don Cooper took over. Don Cooper.
Yeah. I was about to say, Don Kessinger was fired, but no, that's just because there's a jump from 1978 to 1986 because Tony La Russa's 2 moved up to 2022 because they rehired him.
There it is. That's the guy.
Tony was the last guy.
Yeah.
And then
Hawk.
Doug Rader takes over for a game.
And then I think the rest was Fergosi.
Hawk was the general manager. But yeah, I mean that was the guy that was the manager when Jerry Reinsdorf bought the team, and Fergosi finished out the year, Torborg finished out the year, Lamont finished out the year, Bevington, Manuel, and then as you brought up, Ozzie didn't finish out the last game. Don Cooper took over, and then there was the Tony La Russa health situation where Cairo takes over. So no, I don't think actual firings because Ozzie walked away. So yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. It seems unlike the White Sox. There was a question that we brought up though. Can this clubhouse take on prospects? We heard from Brian Bannister. You talked to him, and he talked about the excitement of maybe putting some of these prospects into the bullpen at the end of the year to see what they have. I know a lot of people are interested in Colson, Edgar Caro, Brian Ramos. We'll talk about them first, but it seems more likely that there will definitely be some youthful pitchers making their major league debuts this season, at the end of the season.
I'll say probably. Yeah, it looks probable because, I guess because why not? I mean, if they're ready to go and if they're ready for a little bit of a tryout, we'll put it that way, in terms of a bullpen role, and it seems that both Brian Bannister and Pedro Grifol, whether he'll be here or not, we don't know, but Pedro Grifol has also spoken in favor of give these guys some time at the big league level so we can evaluate them and we can judge them. So Bannister talked in favor of it, and he's obviously a guy who's very involved in the decision-making when it comes to these young arms. So I don't know who it'll be, because obviously each individual player is on their own schedule and their own timeline and stuff like that. But if, for example, Kai Bush says, hey, I'm doing really well down here in AAA, maybe they throw him in the bullpen in the big leagues for a month. And that doesn't mean he has to start in the big leagues on opening day next year. But these guys who are, again, part of the decision-making process have talked about how that would be beneficial. So I would assume that we'll see at least a couple.
Yeah, and I also assume that by the time next week comes, that some of these players who are on the team and didn't get traded that have expiring contracts would get just outright released and waived by the White Sox so they can catch on with different teams. So you would have to bring up some younger players up there to take their spots on the 40-man.
Yeah, I don't understand. I know Nicky was brought in here to make the clubhouse a little bit better, but I don't understand what Nicky Lopez is still doing here. And as we're talking about Knicks, I don't understand what Nick Senzel's doing here. Corey Julks is still a little bit young, so maybe they give him a little bit more room. But like even then, you look at left field. Apparently, that's Miguel Vargas's best position. I know that Pedro said that
it wasn't yesterday.
Yeah, Pedro said that he feels most comfortable at second base. Like, do they make a decision based on Vargas to either let go Benintendi or Lopez?
Oh, they're not doing that.
I don't see Benintendi going anywhere. But I mean, I guess Lopez could, with the idea of what Herb was just talking about. They might be able to get him an opportunity to go play for a contender, as he did at the end of last year. But in terms of Vargas, I think they've talked about him wanting to play him all over the place, and them basically trying to find out what his best position is. I would say that it's a little odd that you wouldn't know that by the time you traded for the guy, but they're going to try to find out, can he be a guy who's a regular in left field? Can he be a guy who's a regular at second base? And obviously he's bat first. Chris Getz said as much, that they acquired him because of his bat, and if his bat ends up showing off, maybe they just try to find the place where he is least problematic in the field. But again, you're not going to know that until you get eyes on him, and it seems that's what they want to do here over the last couple months.
I hope he hits enough where, as Vinny said, he's just in the lineup. Wherever they put him in, we got to get him in the lineup because we can't live without a Miguel Vargas at bat.
I don't need to see Nick Senzel bat. I don't need to see Nicky Lopez bat. I mean, unless this man is like hungover or like his legs are broken, like he should be in the lineup for the rest of the whole problem in LA was playing time. Yeah. You can give him playing time. You can play him in left field. You can put him at second base. You can play him at third base. You can put him at DH. You can put him at first base. Can he catch? I don't know. Let's see. Just to talk about some of the pitchers though that could come up, looking at the top 30 that I talked about during our live show yesterday, number 1 is Schultz. I would be very, very shocked if Schultz ends up making his major league debut in 2024. He's currently at 62 innings pitched, and I think they talked about getting him near 75 to 90 for this season as he returns. That's pretty much 4 to 5 more starts, and that's pretty much the end of. And he's Double-A.
He's just in Double-A.
He's 13 years old. Fourth is Hagen Smith. Hagen obviously was just drafted. He will not be pulling a Mike Leake and coming up all the way to Major League Baseball, or maybe even teammate Garrett Crochet and coming straight to
Brandon
Major League
Finnegan.
Baseball. Or a Brandon Finnegan.
The Sox had in spring training.
They did.
Diminutive.
Yeah.
Last year. Okay. Not a part of the 95 people they had at spring training this year. Yeah. Then you go down to 6, and that's Jairo Iriarte. Iriarte has been a little bit sloppy, but I mean, maybe that's one of the guys that they just want to see at a major league level. I mean, maybe it's literally just 2 bullpen appearances, but it's 2 bullpen appearances after the Charlotte Knights or Birmingham Barrett season ends. Like, I don't know if it's completely off the table, because we saw, at least with San Diego, they'd be very aggressive promoting guys. If you just want to give him a shot, it doesn't matter what he does. I mean, hey, just give it a shot.
You've called up a few people from Double-A already this
year.
I
wouldn't be shocked about Iriarte. I also wouldn't be shocked about Mason Adams. He has really good control. It seems like that might be a guy too, is also in Birmingham. And you brought up Kai Busch, who's 16th. I think those 3 guys make a lot of sense, along with Jake Eder, of making their major league debut at the end of the year. Busch is in AAA and has been a little bit iffy, but he's 24. It's likely that he would just kind of get the shot next year at some point to just thrive or fail as a major leaguer. It seems like he's getting to that precipice. So it feels like Busch would be thrown in there, and then Eder too. I mean, we already saw him on the major league roster. He didn't make his debut, but was called up to be a part of the taxi squad. Makes sense that they just throw him out there. I don't think we'll see Nick Nastrini though. Nastrini, our guy, has been bad.
And he's still
in Charlotte.
And he's still in the 40-man?
Yeah, he can't throw a strike though. So I think that's part of the thing. I mean, maybe they'll give him a little bit of a shot there, but those are the 5 guys that I could see pitching for the White Sox in the vein of Bannister, throwing those guys out there. Hitters wise, Colson Montgomery has been pretty iffy, and I don't think there is any rush to get him to the major league roster. Do you expect him to make his major league debut in 2024?
Earlier in the year, I very much did. I think right now, let him iron the issues out. I mean, there is no rush for him to get up here, and he's still going to get that opportunity, obviously, and he might even get it on opening day next year. But I don't understand that he needs to be here right now. He absolutely does not. again, the hitting numbers are not the end all be all. You don't have to be hitting 300 in order to get promoted. There's no rule, right? But, if the White Sox look at him and say, you just got more to do. You just got more work to do. You need to master this level before you move on to the next. Then they've made that determination. But they have also been aggressive, right? They've also said, Drew Thorpe, we love what you're doing down at AA. Come on up, And so I think that it really is how the White Sox see Colson Montgomery, not how we or anybody else on the outside see him, because maybe they do promote him and there is more development that goes on at the major league level. But if you were to ask me right now, yes or no for this year, I'd say I would lean toward him debuting in 2025.
Same with me. I don't think that he has done enough at AAA to say that he has graduated from that level. And I don't know if they think that if you can't do it at a favorable ballpark in a favorable league like AAA down there in Charlotte, what would you get benefit out of this last couple months in Chicago? And so, yeah, I think that staying down in the minor leagues and also just letting him tell you by his hitting and or fielding, I'm ready to go. I think a promotion this year would just to be, hey, let's see him at the major league level, not that he has actually won that job or has deserved that opportunity at the major league level. I think that he's still young enough where they're like, there's no rush to get him up here. There's no rush to make him get into the major leagues and just to see him. Let him tell you when. And I think the White Sox are of that mindset. He'll tell us when he needs to come up here.
Yeah, we saw Tim make his debut in June, and it was June, I think, 3 years after he was drafted. That would be similar to Colson. Like, I think that there is no rush. The only thing that you really would take into consideration, we saw with Gunnar Henderson and Corbin Carroll, them winning the Rookie of the Year for their league, with the White Sox not having a top pick. Like, if Colson wins Rookie of the Year, that could give them a back-end first-round pick. That would be huge for a team that is getting ousted outside of the top 5. So maybe that goes into their consideration, but also part of that consideration is he ready and good enough to make that impact where we're not just putting him out to the wolves and screwing him over. So I think that Colson will likely be next year in 2025. Do we see more Brian Ramos? He's been bad in Charlotte, but we've seen him in Major League Baseball already. Like, do they just say you've already had a crazy enough year, we'll just let you finish the year out at Major League Baseball?
Makes sense. Right. And I also think too, it's like, here's the thing. In order for any of these guys to get promoted to the major leagues, they need to have kind of completed a pretty lengthy checklist, right? And Brian Ramos was promoted from AA to the major leagues in the first place because of a roster situation, of a roster reality. He was on the 40-man roster. They were out of infielders on the 40-man roster, so they brought him up. And I don't think he was supposed to stay as long as he did, which ended up actually not being that long, but he had a little bit of success there right off the bat, but that success has very much dried up, especially since he's gone to AAA. Yeah, there's no reason to, as you said, throw these guys to the wolves. Rick Hahn always used to put it, you want to promote somebody so they don't just survive but thrive. And I honestly believe that every player development staff across baseball and every front office wants these guys to succeed. They want them to be in the best position they can be in, to not just help themselves and have good individual success, but to help the team win. There's really no point in saying, hey, you're struggling. Maybe if we make life harder on you by having to face the best pitchers in the world, you'll stop struggling. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case. So if there are guys that really obviously have not, in their minds, have not checked all the items off the list that they need to check off, they're not going to be like, oh yeah, we'll do those later. They really are, I think, following a plan.
And also, I would like to see more time for Lenyn Sosa at multiple positions, including third base. So I think that having him, and then the uncertainty around Yoan Moncada, which I wouldn't play Yoan Moncada ever again as a White Sox, because what's the use? I want to see somebody at third base that maybe in your future you have something there, and to see if Lenyn Sosa can be a good fifth infielder, and or if he is good enough to be an infielder of your future. So let's let some of these young players who actually have maybe a bright future and have done something at the major league level, even though varying degrees of what Lenyn Sosa has done this year in his major league career, I would like to just say 2 months, third base, go ahead and do your thing, Lenyn. And
shout out to Chucky Robinson. It's been fun to see him come up to a major league level and play some baseball, but I think September, at the conclusion of the night season, I think it's likely that Edgar Carroll will get 15 or 16 something games up at a major league level, because he is absolutely 100%, along with Corey Lee, going to be the two catchers on the 2025 team. It seems like he's on the precipice of making the team. I don't think it's too early. He's gone to Charlotte and has looked all right. If you're going to have the platoon and the ability to give him the day off if he has a bad day, like, I mean, we saw Corey benefit, I think, this year from getting a ton of playing time. And when Maldonado started to struggle, he stepped up. Like, I think if you give Corey the starting catcher spot next year and Caro just has to play behind him and just get into a major league routine, I think it could be beneficial for Caro. And I think he's proven at least that AAA and AA pitching aren't really anything to scare him. All right, we're going to wrap up this episode. If Pedro Grifol is fired in the next 2 to 3 hours, might, I don't know, scream.
We'll see you again.
Yeah, we will see you again. Hopefully it happens, after Sunday's loss. When we're
Might not happen at all.
Might not happen at all. But we talked about it nonetheless. And two, just to correct some stuff in the comments, Pedro Grifol does not make $3 million. Front Office Sports wrote that using AI. It is poorly written. It is sloppily written. He is not the second highest paid manager. Craig Counsell has a very deep resume that got him paid an extreme amount. Pedro Grifol never managed a Major League Baseball game before. They did not sign him to an expensive contract. Do not look at Front Office Sports article about top paid managers, because Pedro Grifol is not one of them.
And Bruce Bochy exists.
And Bruce Levine, our guy, corrected the story recently on Twitter, saying that's not true. I think he made $5.5 million over the 3 years. Hasn't even made the $5.5 million yet, because he's not even year 3, and that might get bought out regardless if he's fired.
As the old adage says by our guy Abraham Lincoln, don't believe everything you see on the internet.
Exactly. And Jared saying too, I have a question. What's the benefit of Crochet pitching anymore this season, since he's a diehard? We'll answer it and we'll send it off. The benefit is he needs to get acclimated to a full major league season. If he gets hurt, he gets hurt, but that's going to happen no matter what. If he's not pitching in Major League Baseball games, he will be throwing bullpen games and simulated games every 5 days to keep up with that routine. So whether he's pitching in Major League Baseball games or not, he will still be pitching. So that's the reason why, is because he's trying to be a starting pitcher. Anything else to add to that? Vinnie Duber, our CHGO White Sox beat writer. That's Herb Lawrence. You can follow him at EctorWall23 as our CHGO White Sox community leader. I'm Sean Anderson. You can follow me at Sean_W_Anderson. And thank you to our friend Sarah for producing the show. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
We all silly like the mayor.